I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight. We're very happy to have as our speaker a gentleman by the name of Mike Hardy, Medina resident. Mike joined the Navy prior to the beginning of World War II. After completing basic training at Great Lakes Naval Station, he was luckily sent to Pearl Harbor aboard the USS California, which, when it got there, was unfortunately moored as the first ship on Battleship Row. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, his ship was sunk underneath him. By the end of World War II, Mike had been aboard numerous ships, sunk twice, one more time, and was a participant in some of the Pacific theater's most brutal and bloody battles. Battle of the Coral Sea, Battle of Midway, Guadalcanal. I'd like you to welcome Mr. Mike Hardy.
You know, I see a number of faces here I know, and I see a shipmate here that I know. John Jeske was on the Quincy, sunk in Guadalcanal, and I was on the Astoria. We were both sunk at the same time. And then we put the Santa Fe in commission and went from there. And I was surprised to see him. I see Ralph Waite, and I see some other faces there. I recognize them, but I don't quite, I don't know the names. I can't put the name on their face. I'll go back, and I originally came from Remsen Corners. I don't know, I imagine most of you know where that is. The barn is still there and the chicken coop's there, but the house is tore down. It's where you go on to 271 in 94. And that's where I originally come from, and I went to school over in Granger, which was Granger at that time. Now it's Highland. I left, I had quite an experience as a young man over there with most of the farmers there. There was a lot of farming going on. And there was a gentleman, Doc Salisbury, a veterinary. I used to travel with him. So between all these older people, I learned a lot, and they were all a good education. But going to school, when spring come, I didn't like to be in school. I want to be out plowing or making maple syrup. I want to be in a sugar bush. So I had met a cousin that got in the Navy a couple of years before I went in. And when I seen that uniform, that prompted me to choose the Navy as a career. And I left in 11th grade in 1940, and I was still 16. My mother signed for me, and when I was 17, they took me. I went through Great Lakes. I went aboard the California in Bremerton, Washington. And then from there, we went down to Long Beach, which was our home port. And all of us, we went out to Pearl on maneuvers out there with the battleships, about 6 months before the war started. We came back to Vallejo out of San Francisco and had our bottom done. We went back to Long Beach, and for some reason or other, all of a sudden, we never expected it, but we were shipped right back out to Pearl which we didn't, Honolulu wasn't much there. So at that time, we would rather be in Long Beach at our home port. There was more girls in Long Beach than there was in Pearl Harbor. And so we were shipped out there. We went on a few maneuvers, and then on Sunday morning, nobody ever knew anything like this would ever happen. The Japs attacked us, and they made 2 runs, and they done a lot of damage. We was hit with either 1 or 2 torpedoes, and I think 3 or 4 bombs, and we sunk there right at the Keys where we were tied up, and I think we lost about 101 men on the California, and most of them men were killed up on deck when they were strafing, and they were on the 5-inch guns and the machine guns. And of course, some of them got killed by these bombs and a few by the torpedoes. There was a lot of fire around the ship, and it was all burnt. It was oil burning on the water. Well, the wind blew the fire aft, and the Tennessee run their engines to pull the fire aft and go down the line of battleships, because the West Virginia was astern of us, the Maryland was astern of us, and then there was the Nevada, and of course then there was the Arizona. And when about 11:30, and of course everything was all over with, and there was nothing but fire, and we abandoned ship. Well, we went off the bow because there was no fire up on the bow, and we swam ashore. Well, when I went over the side, I know they said, don't dive in, jump in. And of course we had life jackets on, and we jumped in and swam ashore. Well, at that time, I don't know, for some reason or other, I didn't shut my mouth, and I got a lot of bunker fuel in my mouth. And when I got ashore, I wanted something to rinse my mouth out. There was no water, but I run down past the battleships down along the airfield, and there was a building over on the other side of the airfield. I felt maybe I could get something there and to wash my mouth out. There was an officer's quarters down there, and I got in a refrigerator. I either got some orange juice or pineapple juice, and but still, it took about a day to get that taste out of my mouth. So if you jump over the side anytime, keep your mouth shut. Anyway, there was officer got 4 of us fellas, and we went around in a 36-foot motor launch for about the next 4 or 5 days looking for bodies around the battleships. We found a couple, and after that, they had a lot of sailors go over to Tin Tin Dock in the Navy Yard, and they were picking men to go aboard these ships that were coming in, which had peacetime complements. I was there was a big platform. There was a commander up there, and nobody'd pick a ship. He says, "Well, if you don't pick one, I'll pick you." So I looked around, and there was a guy from the California. His name was Hank James. He was a descendant of Jesse James, and with his mustache, and he was from either Montana or Wyoming, somewhere out there. He had about 18 years in. I says, "Hank, what ship would you pick?" He says, "I put the Astoria in commission in '34, and she's a hell of a feeder." Well, when he said she's a hell of a feeder, that got to me, and I picked the Astoria. It was a heavy cruiser. It was a sister ship to the Quincy, which John was on, the Vincennes, the New Orleans, and I think the San Francisco. And I went aboard her, and my battle station was 1.1 anti-aircraft on her. The California, I was in number 2 turret on the 14-inch guns. And I was a shell captain on a shell deck in number 2 turret on the California. We were with the Lexington aircraft carrier, the Yorktown, and our admiral was Fletcher, Frank Jack Fletcher. They called him Black Jack Fletcher. And we got into we were down in Coral Sea, and they picked us up, we picked them up. I don't remember if we sunk one of their carriers. If we didn't, we damaged it bad. But they had sunk the Lexington. The Lexington, the first time we ever seen any planes come in, or they had dive bombers come in, and they no sooner came down, they were coming after the Lexington, then torpedo planes come in. And that's the first time that we ever knew anything like that would ever happen. The Lexington got hit, and we thought maybe we were going to bring her back, but she exploded, and the fires hit the right places. And the last I seen her, and of course they abandoned ship, she was red hot almost from stem to stern. And all the ships took all the survivors they can get off of her. Mostly destroyers got most of the survivors. And we came back. The Yorktown was hit, but she came back, and we went back to Pearl. The Yorktown was, they heard and repaired her because they picked up messages that the Japs were going to Midway. Well, everything went out there. There was, we went to the Midway battle. There was 3 carriers. And so in the 3 carriers, the Yorktown got hit, which we were with, and Fletcher's flagship before the war was the Astoria. But they said, you can't be on the Astoria, you gotta be on a carrier. So his flag went to the Yorktown, and when he was sunk, we took him back aboard the Astoria. And of course, there was another case where they thought maybe they'd bring her back, but of course the sub put 2 torpedoes in and finished her off. And then we came back, without the Yorktown back to Pearl. So Admiral King, and you heard of Admiral King High School, he was from Lorraine, and he was a no-nonsense admiral. And he had it in for Fletcher because he lost the Lexington, because the Lexington was Admiral King's baby. And so he never got credit, Fletcher never got credit for anything. And if, you know, we sunk 4 of their carriers in the Midway battle, which was considered now one of the greatest battles we had during World War II. Sinking 4 of their carriers and only losing 1 of ours. We went on the offensive again out to Guadalcanal, and we went and landed troops there, and the Vincennes, Quincy, Astoria, and the Australian cruiser Canberra landed troops. And of course, we had destroyers with us, and we done the bombarding on Guadalcanal. And of course, about the 2nd or 3rd night, they came down through what they call a slot, and our radar never picked them up, and they sunk all 4 of us. And as I understand, the Canberra, the Australian cruiser Canberra, really got clobbered. And the John ship went down about, 30-some minutes. Vincennes went down less than an hour. We went down the next morning. The destroyer Bagley came alongside and took wounded off. I went aboard the Bagley. I had got hit in the leg. We took a hit on these 1.1s above the bridge, and the gunner's mate on that gun, Bob Rydell, he got hit in the legs bad. And the guy that was a trainer, his name is Loomer, a shell hit him, cut him in the seat right in half. We lost him, and he was, I got to know him well, and he was originally, he was born in Canada. And I got hit in the leg, and where the shrapnel went in made about a 1/2-inch hole, but where it come out the back, it made a big hole. And my foot was wet, and how did my foot get wet? I put my hand down there, and it was full of blood. And then I started getting weaker, and I started hobbling and grabbing stanchions to walk. And when the Bagley come alongside, they had like a gangway over it, and I went aboard the Bagley and found a bunk, laid down, and I just kept holding my hand on my leg. I thought maybe I would stop the blood. Well, evidently it did or it didn't, I don't know. It was dark, everything was, you couldn't see too much. I went by the wardroom, I seen some arms and legs, and I just went right on by. I wasn't going to stop there. About a day later, we went from the Bagley to the President Jackson, and she unloaded all the Marines, and she took all these survivors off all these ships. And then I had a doctor look on me at my leg, and he had a table like this, a mess table. It was very hard. I laid on it, and he opened it up and cleaned it out. Give me nothing. And I knew I was hit. That was the only pain I had. And so he put some powder on it, and he says, well, from now on, just see a pharmacist, mate. I did. And it healed up. We came back to, I think it was San Francisco. And we all got 30 days leave. And of course, you went across the country in a train. And then we went back to the West Coast, and they took all these sailors, about 500 survivors from these 3 ships, shipped them over to Philadelphia, and we put this cruiser here, the Lucky Lady, in commission, was a light cruiser. And there was about 500 of survivors went across country on this terrain, and they were drunk. They would get off the train and kiss women, and they were having a hell of a time going across the country.
That's a top secret, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm not supposed to tell it. Well,
What ship were you on that went down?
Astoria.
Oh, the Astoria.
It was a heavy cruiser. The Vincennes, Quincy, Astoria, and the Australian cruiser Canberra. We put that ship in commission. That ship has about 16 battle stars. We were at Iwo Jima bombarding way before they landed, and then when they landed that morning, we were there bombarding again. We were at Chichijima bombarding the radio towers there, because the planes that were going to Japan, they were letting Japan know the planes were coming. So we were there bombarding to knock them out, and that's where Old Man Bush went down. And you know, they sent a submarine come up and picked them up, but in the meantime, the Japs had a boat going out there to pick them up. But the submarine got him first. Now, if they'd have got him, they'd have ate his liver, because some of them pilots that got shot down over Chichijima, they ate their livers. Evidently, to them, it's a delicacy. So, Old Man Bush was lucky. Bush is the guy that got these medals for us, the old man. It's a congressional medal authorized by Congress, but it's not the Congressional Medal of Honor. And Old Man Bush is the reason we have them for the Pearl Harbor survivors. Now, you know, they gave a medal to the Tuskegee Flyers. This is the same medal, except they have a plane on them and we have a battleship on ours. And, but we were the ones on the Santa Fe that went alongside the Franklin when she got hit. And as I understand, they lost about 900 men on the Franklin. And we took about 700 and something off on the Santa Fe and brought them back. And she did make it back to Pearl, but she was racked and ruined. And of course, it was towards the end of the war. They never fixed her and brought her back. I guess they must have scrapped her. But we did. The Pittsburgh took her in tow, which was a heavy cruiser, and we did bring her back. And we were back out there in a number of other things. And when the war ended, we pulled in the next morning when MacArthur and the Missouri was going into Japan. We pulled in the Sasebo we were Cruiser Division 13, 3 cruisers and 6 destroyers. And our admiral negotiated with an admiral in Sasebo, which is the Navy Yard. And the guy that run the boat and took our admiral over, I talked to him later. He says they had to get the admiral out of bed over there. He was still sleeping. But anyway, I had shipped over. And about a week in Sasebo, they had an all-nav come out. If you shipped over, you could take your leave right from there. So I took my leaves with a couple other guys, and we came back. Got leave out of San Francisco. And then I had already become a second-class bosun mate. I took 700 and some men up to Adak, Alaska. They had a LORAN station up there, and they were taking men off and relieving them, and I took them up there on a transport. And then there was 3 90-foot Seagoing tugs up there. This commander says, take your pick. And we were, during the war, we were in the Aleutians and got the Japs out of there. And in that Aleutian chain's a hellhole. So I said, this isn't for me. So I got on an Army plane and went to Kodiak and went aboard a salvage ship, ARS-21. And the Valdez, Alaska, I think we were in there 3 or 4 times. And it was just an old dock, and about 1 ship can tie up in there. And the snow was high, very high. And there was about 1,100 people living there in 4 bars, because that's all they could do in the winter, is just drink. And there was nothing to do. The airport was closed down because they couldn't fly out over the mountains there. And we had a guy go over the hill over there, and the marshal in the town caught him. And the chief and I went over there and got him. And I had the handcuff on him, and the chief was in back of me with a .45, and the snow was that deep. By the time we got back to the ship, my wrist was raw from them handcuffs. I evidently put them on too tight. But we came down from there down to Astoria, Oregon to San Diego, and we were towing ships from San Diego to Bremerton, Washington. We would take 3 ships, destroyers, escorts at 1 crack, and tow them up there. And we also took the repair ship Medusa and took her up there. And I don't know what they did with them. But then my time was about up, And I got out of the Navy in San Pedro, got on a train, and went up to Seattle, Washington, because I'd met my wife up there. So that determined about everything that I was going to do. We got married up there, and when I come back to Medina, went to the courthouse. I don't know, they give us $100, and I come out, went in building trades, was in Parma, and I became a bricklayer, and I started in '54, Medina cut stone. From 50 to 56, I built 50 houses along with my masonry. We got lots that were put through the Whittemore Act in Congress, wiping out all the back taxes, improved lots. I paid $250 a lot. It's almost unheard of. The guys that bought them, Forest City, Alex Folder, Rudy Gall, all them guys, they only paid $50 for them. And the last, I built a two-family on the other side of Brook Park in Cleveland on the Wetzel. Sold it for $32,500. Solid masonry, no wood, solid masonry. I've done a few of them. And of course, I got out of that. The reason I started Medina Cut Stone, I heard some figures, and after I got in them figures were misnomers. So I'm still in the business, 60 years, and I'm still working. And there's Ralph Waite, he's still working. And the guy next to him, I know him, I can't put a handle on his face. Yeah. So that's about all I have to say, and I appreciate you inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to take some questions, okay?
What's that?
We'll have some questions.
Okay.
All right. Anybody have some questions? Yes, let me get over here. This doesn't amplify your voice, it's just...
Do you have a favorite ship and why?
The favorite ship, I guess it would be the Santa Fe. Oh, there's a book out on a Santa Fe and a Franklin, and it's written by Steve Jackson. And Steve is I think he's still with he's out in Denver, Colorado. I think he's still with the Denver Post. His father was on this ship with us. And that's how he got to write the book. I met him in Norfolk, and he got me in here quite a few times due to the fact that I was more senior than the rest of the crew, because I've been sunk on the California and the Astoria before I went aboard this ship. And they have hardbacks. Now they went and they got these softback books now. Of course, they're a lot cheaper than the hardbacks. And I have one hardback, which Steve signed and gave to me. But I never realized what it takes to write a book. I was talking to this man off and on for 3 years, and him writing this book. And he wrote another book, No Stone Unturned, and he's got some prizes for his books. But I was surprised how many people that are history buffs have bought this book.
late, but the California, that went down at Pearl Harbor, but they refloated it, didn't
right. The California was sunk in Pearl. It was the first battleship in a line of battleships.
they? Yeah, but didn't they refloat it? and
They
came back
refloated it, and they refloated her in the West Virginia, and it took the Tennessee didn't sink. They took them back to Bremerton. A lot of people don't. This is something, and it pertains to the Bismarck, the German battleship Bismarck. Them 3 ships went back to Bremerton. They had Mark III radar for fire control. They put Mark 8 on them, and with, like in San Bernardino Straits, when them battleships come up, them 3 ships were getting hits. The Pennsylvania and the New Mexico had Mark III. They couldn't even get on target. When the Bismarck sunk the Hood, she had Mark III radar and her fire control. And the Bismarck had the latest radar. She was one heck of a ship. And that's why she sunk the Hood so fast.
Yeah, I was in the Navy, but later, and there were some of the guys left over from World War II were with us, and they were telling a story about the California taking, I think it was at Iwo Jima when they were using kamikazes. It took
Yeah.
3 kamikazes.
She took one. She got hit with one.
Never stopped shelling the beach.
Yeah, yeah. I have a picture of that somewhere.
I have a question just of my own. You mentioned that this ship, the Lucky Lady, had 16 battle stars.
Right.
What does it mean to get a battle star? How do you get a battle star?
Well, let's take Iwo Jima. That would be a battle star. Midway would be a battle star. Coral Sea would be a battle star. Pearl Harbor's a battle star. Out of the 3 ships, I have 22 battle stars. And we have, from going alongside this ship, we have a presidential unit citation. Isn't that right, John? We have the presidential unit citation?
Beat the hell out of me on the.
Yeah, I know we got a citation. But if you come to my office, I can show you something in medals. Some guy by name of Josh, he put this thing up. Boy, it's amazing how many medals you have you don't know about. Commemorative medals.
And you have the Purple Heart, too.
Yeah, yeah.
How long did it take that wound to heal of yours?
You know, when I came home after all that happened, I was coming down Route 3. We lived at Foskett and Route 3, but it was Remsen Road. 3 didn't go through there. Weymouth went around the other way. And I come down the road, and when I come home, I was still hobbling. I couldn't, you know, I didn't walk through. I didn't have crutches at that time, but it healed up pretty quick. But I still hobble for quite a while.
Feel the concussion from when the Arizona got it?
Concussion from where?
When the Arizona, when it blew up? When you were on to California?
You know, every time we would take a hit, being in the turret and not seeing out, I thought we were firing the guns, because when you're firing 14-inch guns, there's a lot of vibration and noise. And I was wondering why they weren't calling for shells. But it wasn't. We weren't firing the guns, we were taking hits. And far as the Arizona goes, she was way astern of us, and there was battleships between. We were the ones up in the head of the line of battleships. So I did, when I run down the airfield, I wasn't far from the Arizona when I run down the side of the airfield. Oh, when we got ashore, we didn't know if they were going to still strafe or what. A bunch of us jumped beside some barrels, and somebody says, "What's in the barrels?" If they hit them, and there was a color guy there. He took off. I'll tell you, you couldn't keep up with him.
I got 3 questions. The first one was, you said you chose the ship because it was a good feeder.
Yeah.
Did they? They
Yeah.
really did feed you. Okay. Secondly, and this may be a laughable question for people in the know, but the paint job between Atlantic and Pacific Fleet, was that in place when you got on the California and went to Pearl the first time? Was it the paint job on the outside of the ships, the different?
The paint job was gray.
Okay.
You know, prior to that, sometime not too far, they were white, more white. And then towards the World War II, most ships were being painted gray.
Okay, but the Atlantic Fleet and the Pacific Fleet had 2 different paint jobs. That's why I wondered if you were aware of that.
I wasn't aware of that.
Okay.
The only time I was in the Atlantic when we put the Santa Fe in commission, we went and shook down the Santa Fe in the Atlantic in rough weather.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's the only time that I've been in the Atlantic.
Okay, my third question is, since you ran with flat tops in World War II, have you been aboard any flat tops that are new, the Enterprise, the
The
Sarah?
only time I went, when we come back from the Coral Sea, the Yorktown was in Pearl. We were in Pearl there. We had no facilities to make dog tags. We all went aboard the Yorktown because they had facilities. They made our dog tags aboard the Yorktown. And prior to that, we never had dog tags. But they found out right away we better put dog tags on all these sailors and servicemen. Well, from what I understand, I have a good friend in Medina, retired from the Navy as a full captain. He says, you would never recognize the service today, regardless what you were, a Marine, Army, or Navy, especially in the Navy, you wouldn't recognize the ships today compared to World War II.
Well, had you never seen one in Baltimore in these last years in travel?
I seen an officer on a carrier, one of these new carriers. The ship's wheel was that big around. We had wheels where I had a 48-foot Chris Craft. I had a wheel about that big. It was a wood wheel, and I made a ring around it and had it chromed and everything.
Where did the Navy get all the talented people to rebuild the ships?
Where did they get them?
Yeah.
You know, looking back, and I was just thinking of that question. You know, they got them off the farms in this country. There was a lot of guys came off of farms. We had a half a dozen guys in my division on the Santa Fe. They come from the swamps down in New Orleans. And it's amazing where they come from. A lot of them never finished school, and number one, when I was really a kid when I went aboard the California and sunk on her. And you know, after that, I became a man in a hurry. Then, after I was sunk on the Astoria, I really became a man.
There were two officers there in Midway. No, at the Pearl Harbor. One was Admiral Husband Kimmel. The general was Lieutenant General Short.
Yeah.
Both of those men lost their command as a result of Pearl Harbor. The one, especially Kimmel, spent the rest of his days trying to resurrect his career. Do you have anything to say relative to those two people?
You know, the Pearl Harbor survivors at one of our conventions had Admiral Kimball's offsprings. One was a colonel in the Marines and one was a commander in the Navy or something. And they were still fighting to exonerate him. And you know, Admiral Kimball and General Short, they took the blunt of that. And they still have not exonerated him. And for some reason, Congress won't do nothing about it. There's something involved there that they don't want to exonerate these two men.
Did you ever serve with Bull Halsey?
Yeah, he came aboard our ship and gave us a speech. And in Astoria book, or Santa Fe book, I have pictures of him aboard ship. And Admiral Halsey pulled some real boo-boos. The one down there, and we were with him when he went up there after them Japs sucked us up north from San Bernardino Straits. If that wouldn't have happened, that would have been a hell of a great battle. We'd have won. Then the other big one was when he took us in that typhoon. There's a book on that. I just got done reading. We lost them 3 destroyers, lost 700 and some men. There wasn't too many to survive from there. Them ships rolled where the water came into the stacks. That's how far over they went. And it just happened that when they went over, they rolled over and came back and rolled over. But this one time, they rolled over and didn't come back. We rolled over, I think, 20 degrees, and nothing happened to us. But boy, I'll tell you, you had to hang on, and we couldn't feed nobody. And I seen a picture with where the ships went through right directly through this typhoon. And one group went right alongside it. And that never should have happened.
He asked about Bull Halsey, but what about Spruance?
Spruance, I think I never heard anything bad about him, but I think Spruance is the one that took the credit for the Midway battle. Because he was there, and I forget what carrier he was on, but I think they gave Spruance credit for the Midway battle.
My father-in-law fought in the invasion of the Philippines, and wasn't Halsey in trouble for something? Didn't he get into some Japanese gambit? And I think, if I remember correctly, he ran off into the Pacific chasing a Japanese Navy that really wasn't there. It was a decoy, and left the beaches unguarded. Is that true, or did you hear anything more about that?
I don't know the particular case, but there was something there. We were down in Luzon. We finished off a bunch of ships that the carriers had hit, and they were running like heck, and we sunk quite a few of these ships, mostly transports, down in Luzon. And we bombarded, and of course the Philippines was really General MacArthur's baby. He was more in charge of all that down there. Really, they wanted to bypass the Philippines, you know, Nimitz, but Roosevelt let MacArthur have his way.
You said earlier that the people that refloated some of these ships were the farm boys. They came off the farm. Now, was that because there were so many of them from the farm, or because they had special talents because they were used to working machinery, or both?
Well, you know, I remember the Depression. A lot of fellas went in the 3C camps, and from there they went into service. A lot of them boys came from the farms. A lot of them come from the city. But there was a depression on, and here you got a nice bed, you got $21 a month, and then $36. And you couldn't get that, you know, during the Depression. You were lucky to get, if you wanted a WPA job, I know that was hard to get. So, knowing on the 3 ships that I were on, 4 ships, a lot of them boys were from the farms. I think I was the only one from Medina. I didn't know any other.
Battleships were named for states. Heavy cruisers were named for cities. Carriers, for the most part, were named for famous battles. And submarines were named for fish. How did they name destroyers and all the auxiliary ships? Did they have a system of picking names for them?
Destroyers were mostly named after famous men. Yeah. And I think they still do. Medina never got a name on even a light cruiser.
My grandfather was in World War I in the Navy, and was in Vladivostok, you know, at the end of the war, actually when the war ended. He told me a lot of stuff. A lot of it wasn't true, but he said he knew an awful lot of Navy men that didn't know how to swim. Did you find that to be true in your, or even yourself? You do know how to swim.
Yeah. You know, when you went through boot camp, somewhere along that line you had to swim. So I don't think there was many that didn't know how to swim.
Could have been true. He told me a lot of stories.
You know, my brother was in the Marine Corps. He was in the 4th Marine Division. We were bombarding Iwo Jima, and he was landing there. He says, "I see your ship out there, number 60. We were in the steakhouse in Medina here years ago. My brother never said much. Very intelligent guy. He was in the 4th Marine Division. He was sitting down the end of the bar, and everybody over here was talking about sailors and seasickness. Just out of clear blue sky, he pops up and he says, "You know, every time I see a sailor, I get seasick."
On that thing about swimming, I was in the Navy. We had to, you know, you had to jump off like a 20-foot tower and go to the other side of the pool. We had a couple guys that couldn't swim, so the rest of us, you know, we do that.
Pull them aside.
We just took them and, walked along the bottom and pulled them up and we got them. So there were some guys that maybe they couldn't swim.
My grandfather could float like a cork. I mean, I remember him at 80 years old in Florida, and he was floating on his back, his legs crossed, smoking a cigarette. It's like, well, the guy was meant to be in the Navy.
You know, up in Alaska, when I was up there after the war, they say the Russians come across the water there at the Bering Straits in Alaska when the ice was thick. Well, you know, when I was up there were a lot of Russian people up there, and like in Valdez, went in there and went to get this guy, and our buddies were all in there drinking. And these women up there they call them kluches. They were half Russian and half Eskimo. And they had boots on, and they could drink. Vodka. Yeah, it's potato juice. They call it Petrushka.
You towed the ships from San Diego up the coast to, what is it, Bremerton, Washington? You had 3, and you were pulling 3 at a time?
3 at a track.
Towing.
How long did that journey take?
You know, in towing, you think you take a line and pull straight. You don't do that. A cable has a lot of scope. All you do is pull that cable, and that ship comes. They had them hooked up. When we went down there, picked them up. We only picked up 1, and the other 2 would come along. But every ship, there were almost 3-inch towing cables, and you'd have a big scope. It'd be way down in the water. You pull the cable, whatever's on the end will come. We had 4 diesel engines on the curb, which was probably equal to diesel engines on a train.
How long did it take to get up there?
Well, we only went about 3-4 knots, 5 knots at the most.
When you're on board ship, especially during these battles and everything, how aware were you of what was going on around you? Did they keep you informed of a bigger picture, or did you have any concept of a battle you were in, or you just do whatever they told you from minute to minute?
When I was aboard the Santa Fe, our first captain was Russell Berkey. Russell Berkey, he kept us informed about everything that went on. The next captain was Gerald Wright. He didn't do us so much, but Berkey was one that would get on that horn, and he'd tell us what was going on, where we're going, what's going to happen, and everything. And he's the guy that went to school, I think, with Halsey at Annapolis, and he made 4-star, and he'd come to our reunions, and he always said that Halsey was a dumb SOB.
It occurred to me before, when you were injured and then you eventually got home, did your mom know you had been injured before you got there?
No. My dad seen me first, and he was out in the yard, and he started crying. And he put his arms around me, yeah. But that's the first they knew. And then after I was home a week or so, they had the picture in the Plain Dealer or the News, I don't know which one, of the 3 ships that went down in the paper. Yeah. And I had a book that was all stamped secret with all the men that were killed on the Astoria. There was 380 some. We took 68 hits, 6-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, and 8-inch. And the ones that weren't hit, most of them had shrapnel in them. Now, I had a friend lived in Bay Village, Bill Miller. He was a contractor. And Bill was doing a job for Commander Ray, Rush Spark Relay. You know it?
Know of him.
Yeah, you heard of him. His name was Ray Hershberger. And he says, I wonder how he got that name, Commander Ray. I said, well, maybe he was Commodore of the Yacht Club. So Bill says, I'll ask him. So the next day went to the job and he says, no, I was a full commander in the Navy. He says, I was sunk on the Astoria. Miller says, Jesus, my friend was sunk on the Astoria. So Ray and I got together 3-4 times, and he belonged to the yacht club over on the west side, that big yacht club they have, and he took me to lunch there a couple times. And this book I had marked secret with all the names, and his name was there and mine was. There was 380 some killed. They were all in there, and the ones who were wounded, there were certain sections. So he says, give me that book. He says, I'll copy it. So I did. About 2 weeks later, Ray was at his son's house, and they're having supper. He went out to the car and he dropped dead. I can't get that book back from his son.
The reunions. How often do you guys get together, and about how many of you get together?
California doesn't have reunions anymore. The Astoria give them up. The Santa Fe, we're having a reunion in San Antonio in October. Generally, we get about 30 guys there. We'll have, with the wives, about 60 people there. And when we're there, I told the guy in charge about the Nimitz museums in Texas, about an hour's ride from San Antonio to Fredericksburg. There's a big museum there because Nimitz is from that town. And Old Man Bush has got a big museum there too. So we're going to spend the day going up there on the bus.
You get sunk, you go out, they send you out to the Pacific, you get sunk on the first ship. They send you over and you get sunk again. When the ship was going down, was there like a lot of chaos, or was it controlled, or on your second ship, I mean the first one?
Well, you know,
if you don't want to answer it, that's fine.
When I was sunk twice and went back out, I didn't run away. I went right back out. And everybody seemed to do the same thing. They went right back out if they were sunk. Pilots went down, were picked up by destroyers. They went aboard another carrier and they flew.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate